Hi, I'm Lindsay Weaver. I'm our VP of Strategic Analytics here at Crowd, working really closely with our advanced analytics experts, as well as our folks on our data intelligence team behind the scenes to bring all things measurement and analytics together.
And I'm Dr. Gabriel Hughes. I'm the Global Director of Advanced Analytics here at Crowd. And today we are going to be talking about marketing mix modeling, or MMM. Marketing mix modeling is a whole model of your business. It's used to optimize your marketing mix. It's a statistical modeling methodology that needs to be applied by experts to understand how your marketing drives sales, ROI, and so on. Lindsay, why do marketers worry so much about incrementality? What is incrementality?
Well, incrementality is essentially proving the value of any marketing or media that you have in place, right? It's ultimately going to be the value of all of our efforts put in against sales, business outcomes, whatever your primary KPI is. How does MMM play a role in incrementality?
Yeah, so MMM models incrementality. So it's not like just turning off your activity and see what the marketing's doing. You don't want to do that. So instead, you model incrementality by understanding seasonal drivers, other drivers of your marketing, and then the additional value that marketing brings. MMM seems to be growing in popularity amongst marketers. Why is that?
First and foremost, we have to talk about privacy first marketing realities right now. You know, our MTA models, things that are based on cookies, people feel like they're going away, right? MMM really lets us aggregate that data approach, which makes it, naturally, much more compliant with things like GDPR, CCPA, and really the cookieless future as we know it.
People love the outputs because it sort of really speaks to the C-suite, to the CFO, CMO conversation, because it's all about the big picture, the budgeting, the planning. So
Exactly.
That's another reason why MMM continues to be popular.
So, Gabe, we talk a lot with our brands, with our clients around brand and performance and how we bring that together. Talk to me a little bit about how brand can be measured through MMM.
So MMM can measure both short run and long run effects. And we think of branding as a more long run effect in a model. So we have to think about lagged effects and baking in a long run MMM, which is something we can do. We can also do things like add in brand awareness metrics and so on. So it kind of does require expertise, but yeah, it is possible to look at brand and performance in the round within your MMM model if you go about it in the right way.
As marketers, how can we use MMM to ultimately drive recommendations?
That's the job of us as, analysts and econometricians to take those MMMs and make them into recommendations that you can use. So a key concept is a response function, which is really understanding how when you do more marketing, you don't just get, linear returns, you get like diminishing returns to scale, and you have to bake in assumptions around audience, reach and frequency. So it really does require a deep understanding of the marketing as well as the statistics to arrive at recommendations for things like the optimal marketing mix, targeting a certain level of sales or a certain ROI.
So, Gabe, we know MMM isn't our only tool in our toolkit. What other analytical approaches work really well with an MMM model?
The World Advertising Research Council, the IAB, Google, Meta, a lot of organizations, a lot of experts recommend something called the trifecta of marketing methods. So this is where you combine MMM with multi-touch attribution and with experiment. We are one of the very few agencies in the world that actually deliver all three in a customized way for our clients. So these are complementary because, MTA gets right into the weeds of individual campaigns and tactics within the digital funnel, whereas experiments are important because they validate and calibrate. To be really sure of the level of incrementality, you need to conduct an experiment. We can take the experimental results and kind of feed them in to our MMM using a kind of approach called calibration and constrained optimization. So it's a bit technical, but basically for a complete picture of everything, you need to bring in other methods, and we can bring in other methods beyond that to really get to grips with your challenges as a marketer. So, Lindsay, we wanted to understand how MMM is evolving, and so we did a LinkedIn poll, and the results weren't quite what I expected anyway.
So, interestingly enough, the most popular result was tapping into dynamic or live MMM platforms. We kind of expected a different answer there, but it makes sense when you think about it, right? Especially as we move to the cookieless future, folks are using MMM more and more to justify their marketing and media spend. Dynamic lets you tap into having that output or that result on a much more frequent cadence. Usually we're used to, at best, getting quarterly MMM results, and now we can get results back on a weekly or even daily basis in some cases to help make those optimizations and those investment changes, right?
And so if we've got the engineering to basically plug into those sources, if we can get the data on that kind of level of frequency, some of our custom offerings for MMM do include indeed dynamic MMM because it's what clients want.
As much as we want to tap into dynamic and live MMM to have all our results all the time, what are some of the challenges or reasons why we might not necessarily want to do that, Gabe?
Technically, it's now easier to do, and this is why we are offering it to clients. But of course, MMM models were always estimated with years and years of data. And it does take a while for marketing to actually impact people, especially brand marketing. You don't want to move faster than your customers. But also, if your estimates are moving around all the time, then it suggests that there might actually be something unstable about the model. These are complex models with complex dynamics over time, including seasonality. So really going into smaller timeframes does risk trying to ask the MMM to do too much, which is why we still think complement it with other techniques like granular MTA, which uses a lot more data to get those results. MMM is being used by marketers differently today than it used to be years ago. So just talk to me about that evolution and from your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. We used to really talk about using MMM as relates to offline marketing drivers. So things like TV, radio, when you're working with maybe a CPG or a retail client, bringing in-store sales, right? I think now we're seeing a lot more cross-vertical usage with MMM, certainly within CPG retail, just the same, but we're seeing a lot more digital-led brands using MMM now, definitely driven by, some of the challenges around data compliance and cookieless, but you're also able to bring in things like promo or pricing effects and omni-channel planning.
Yeah, things like retail media, you can't pick that up because you don't have that direct data, but you need to include it. So we've had to come up with ways to, model retail media, which is not just a channel. As marketing evolves, so MMM has to evolve.
How have some of the technical elements of MMM evolved?
Obviously, computing power has massively exploded, so we can leverage the ML, machine learning, and computing power to just do a lot of the grunt work. So, for example, we have a genetic optimization approach. We crunch through thousands upon thousands of models to find one that meets the kind of audience reach, frequency, and other constraints, as well as meeting diagnostic tests to find the model we want. Other techniques are similar, using Bayesian priors. So basically, the modeling process has been able to evolve with computing power, and that will continue to happen with AI and such like. Well, Lindsay, there's been a lot of interest recently and in recent years in open source and kind of DIY models, things like Google's Meridian and Meta's Robin. Interesting area.
Yeah. Just to take us back to the LinkedIn poll that we did, we thought we'd see a pretty high response rate around how folks are using MMM and that open source or DIY model. It's certainly something that's available and there for folks to use and a good starting point. But we definitely hear a lot from clients who are coming to us and saying, we tried to do our own MM model. It's not necessarily working the way that we thought it would, or we're getting kind of that utilization out of it. Tell us a little bit about why you think that might be, Gabe.
Yeah, I think it's great that Google and others have done this because it just democratizes the whole field and makes it more transparent. But you do need data science expertise, and you also need marketing expertise to really put these pieces of the puzzle together and do something. It's not like you can just put the data in and expect to get answers out. And that's because there's a whole range of different assumptions you need to make, a lot of complex statistical diagnosis you need to run. It's no good having the black box that you don't understand with MMM. And then you have all the layers of interpretation on top, which is probably why it didn't top out in the poll quite as high as we thought it might do. People are more interested in what they can do with things like forecasting and with the dynamic MMM.
So, Gabe, talk to me about how we can now use MMM to predict and forecast outcomes.
Well, MMM always was a predictive technique, right? So it always was like taking these inputs like marketing, like these drivers, and then predicting the outputs. But then with the new technology, we can turn that around much more quickly and we can run multiple simulations. One of the things we can do is kind of say, okay, let's really explore a really wide range of possibilities around different levels of budget, different marketing mix, and then really work out what is the best strategy based on like forecasting and prediction.
And that's really where, at Crowd, your analytics team becomes best friends with your strategy and planning team, right? And ultimately using those forecasts to run through different scenarios and really be incredibly critical about what we expect to see out of our media plans and generating that next best dollar spent.
Right. And you strategy guys, you take that input and that feedback and we put it back into the models to calibrate the models, and we just get better and better and better. We call it return on intelligence, guys. So that's what we're all about.
Schuh really started investing more in brand marketing quite significantly in 2019. We had a couple of years of kind of testing out different channels, and we were really kind of going into new spaces where we'd never invested before in channels like out of home. We didn't have a really robust way of measuring that. So there was internal data we were using, things like footfall data, and also sort of your generic sort of digital attribution as well. But we couldn't really find a good way of measuring the kind of effectiveness of these newer channels that we were investing in. So started to look around 2022 at MMM and having a look at the full funnel and how we could measure that, and also kind of tell the story to stakeholders around the business, because some of the way we were measuring was quite difficult for people to understand who don't work in marketing. The initial and the more detailed results is presented to the marketing team and the digital team, who have a really good understanding of channels. But the great thing about the MMM work is we can also present a top line view to wider stakeholders. So we have taken our finance team through it so that they understand the impact of each channel on offline and online sales, to more senior stakeholders, our parent company as well. So we basically used it to have conversations around the business about the value of marketing and the value of the investment. We started off with multi-touch attribution, and the big driver for us with that was social media. So we're a Gen Z kind of focused brand, and that's who our target audience is. And we kind of see the importance of targeting that audience on various social channels. But if you use traditional last touch, it kind of doesn't value the channel in its entirety. So we started looking at multi-touch attribution for channels like social and other kind of upper funnel channels. But that only gives us a view of what digital sales that those channels drive. So bringing in MMM, we can look at the impact of all those digital channels on our offline sales as well. Put really simply, somebody sees a social ad, then walks into a store and buys a pair of shoes is quite a common customer journey. But with multi-touch attribution alone, you're only seeing somebody clicking through and buying a pair of shoes online. So it kind of gives us the complete picture of how people actually shop, rather than this view of people being binary offline or online. We know people are both. We did a bit of that last year for our peak planning, so for the Christmas campaign. So obviously we get a media plan from our media agency, and then we can actually have a look at our data that we have around the ROI for each of those channels. Because if we're trying to get to a blended target ROI, we can kind of stress test the media plan to make sure that we'll achieve that, and kind of making sure that our budgets are sitting in the right places. So there's probably more that we'd like to look at doing for that, especially in our digital channels, but we have used it for our kind of brand media campaigns. Really good, I think, really straightforward. One of the things I always look for with digital third parties, agencies, is people who speak in plain speak, because research is great, but it's not if you don't understand it. So I think Crowd's really good at the translation part of it, not just the data side of it.
We provide credit reports and scores to consumers, and also credit data to businesses to make informed business decisions. For Equifax, data analytics is at the core of our marketing strategies. It's been instrumental in demonstrating the value of our existing channels on our plan, but also the impact of introducing new channels, as well as understanding the relationships between those channels. Say, for example, what's the causal impact of activating YouTube on generic PPC? It's also vital in helping allocate budgets and forecasting, and helping develop our experimentation plans so we can find more efficiencies in our activity and improve effectiveness of those channels on our plans as well. There's the variety of different sources of data, the quality of that data, the challenge of trying to stitch together complex customer journeys. There's no longer a kind of a single identifier that we can rely on. We've seen businesses reverting back to last touch attribution, and also we're having to deal with platforms that have their own attribution methods, and we have no visibility of what they are and how to use them. So it's a bit of a minefield to try and navigate. I think many businesses have found in the past couple of years, with macroeconomic factors and challenges, retaining marketing budgets has been, quite a hurdle for us. And by demonstrating the contribution and value of advertising, on revenue, it helps keep, the fingers out of the pie, if you will. But ultimately, as a marketer, it helps demonstrate that the marketing plans are effective and are responsible for delivering and generating revenue, but also delivering growth for the business. It's been incredibly reliable and been able to pull all together a multitude of different channel insights. It's been able to prove a lot of what I think some of what we already knew in terms of kind of some of the saturation point of certain channels and some areas that we could push other channels more aggressively. It's been really, really helpful in understanding and measuring kind of short-term and medium performance. But I think one area that's going to be important for us now that that brand, for example, has become more of a staple of our marketing mix, is that understanding what is that long-term latent impact on performance. And we're hopeful that by introducing more advanced insights from other sources that we have access to, and actually using MM for longer, we'll start to be able to identify what that impact is and the relationships and behaviors of the channels on one another. A lot of my experience lies in multi-touch attribution. It's something I've been heavily reliant on for a number of years. So with the deprecation of the cookie and so on, it's required a change of mindset that not every conversion is no longer trackable, and what is trackable is not just the sole contributors to a conversion. So we've really had to adopt a smarter approach to modeling. MMM's become more of a reliable kind of single source of truth for us. We're now able to plug in a price, promotion, PR, there's seasonal demand, which is key to us, as well as economic factors. So all of that can provide just a more reliable forecast, as an example, which is something we've had to be a lot more agile about. So it's just given us that confidence to give a fuller picture of how our advertising is performing. It demonstrates the value of advertising at board level. And so what's key there is that it gives more patience and confidence in providing long-term investment into our marketing plans and therefore helping to deliver growth for the business.